Well, let's speak now to Dean Russell, the Conservative MP for Watford, who is part of the all-party parliament group for coronavirus that's looking at long COVID this week. Good morning to you, Dean.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on the show.
Thanks for joining us. Why has it taken this long for these people to be taken seriously then by politicians? I mean, we've been reported on long COVID since last summer, but it's the first time it's been discussed in Parliament.
Well, I think actually I'm on the Health and Social Care Select Committee, and we definitely have raised it as an issue in the past, I'm sure, as part of the discussions. In terms of the practical measures, though, I think it's important to note that there's actually 60 clinics that have been launched late last year specifically for long COVID patients. So it's specialist sites that we have several, I believe, in Hertfordshire as well. And there's been funding behind that. So whilst there may not have been a debate in Parliament necessarily, which I absolutely wholeheartedly welcome, the actual measures from the NHS and the government side have begun and begun last year.
What could be the long-term impact on the NHS if say, 10, 20% of people are left with long-term illness?
Well, I think that's part of the thing that we need to really look at. As part of the Health and Social Care Select Committee, we've looked at many areas of how COVID has impacted the NHS, looked at the health service and people in general. And I think it's going to be something we really need to take seriously. I'm very confident the government is actually in terms of the work that they've been doing. But what we need to understand is the impact of this, not just long term in terms of COVID now, but is this going to affect people in 5, 10, 20 years' time? And we just don't know. That's the challenge. Yeah. So how we deal with that? And the best way that we can stop people getting long COVID is to stop them getting COVID in the first place.
And as well as the impact on the NHS, of course, it's the impact on being able to return to work and their jobs, because they may not be able to return to the job they do.
Well, this is the real sad part of it. I really feel for people who've got long COVID. And as the lady said on the interview, especially in the early days of COVID, we didn't know much about it. I mean, if you think just around this time last year, we didn't really know about it much at all. And we've had to really learn as we go along. So the impact on individuals, the impact not just on their physical health, but something I'm passionate about is about mental health and the impact on how people feel about themselves, especially, as the lady said, if you're very active and now you can't be, that's going to have a real impact on your life. So people talk about COVID and the numbers. They often talk about hospital beds and often about older generations and the impact on the vulnerable. But this does affect younger people and it affects everybody, but it's also affecting people in different ways. And long COVID is one of those ways that can have a real damaging effect on people's lives.
There doesn't seem to be much understanding by GPs yet on long COVID either. I mean, while there have been long COVID clinics opening, some people are reporting that they are being told at the clinic, we don't know how to treat you.
Well, I think that's part of the learning across the board. We need to make sure that we understand what the symptoms are better, understand what the treatments are better, and continue to improve those, but also awareness of how to diagnose it. And I think, if you consider the fast pace that everything's moved, I really think, now is the time, looking towards this year, knowing how many people have had COVID over the past year, how we best support them. And that includes GPs being able to diagnose or at least being able to refer. And I think that, like I say, the 60 long COVID clinics is a real welcome measure last year to help with that support. But that's only got to grow. That's only got to improve and increase.
So what do you hope will come out of the parliamentary debate this week then, Dean?
Well, I think my take with any debate, it's in part around awareness. I think from a government perspective, as I say, I've been fortunate being on the Health and Social Care Select Committee that we get to grill, really, people like Professor Whitty. I was interviewing Matt Hancock just last week and asking very difficult questions often, quite rightly so, that the public want to know. So that's been happening in the public realm. But I think when you debate in Parliament, that raises awareness more broadly outside of just the areas of health, but also enables a wider voice of a wider list of questions. And I welcome any debates in Parliament. one of the challenges I have is I spoke a lot in Parliament at the start of last year, and it turns out that as you speak more, you go further down the list, so I don't always get called, which is very frustrating. But it's good to see such a wide range of people wanting to talk about this, because ultimately Parliament is there as the voice of the people across the UK, and in my part as the MP for Watford, I speak in the chamber to represent Watford and share the concerns that people raise with me in my inbox and when I'm out in the community and when volunteering.
You've also done a shift at the vaccine as a vaccine volunteer recently. How was that? What were you doing?
It was very uplifting. I've been actually volunteering at Watford General Hospital since March, so on a very regular basis, including Christmas Day, actually. And this was the first time I'd had a chance to volunteer as part of the vaccine team. And I wasn't putting jabs in arms, but what I was doing was just helping, as people came in and make a cup of tea and all those sorts of things. And it was really, I have to say, really uplifting, because a lot of the people that were coming into the vaccination centre at the hospital obviously were staff. And, the relief on their faces after having the jab, invariably they said they hardly felt a thing. And really it felt quite routine. They came in, had the jab, did a bit of paperwork, had a nice cup of tea or coffee, and then they were off. But it was really uplifting, both in terms of the volume of people that were coming through. I think we've done well over 2,000, if not a lot more, staff now at the hospital. But more so, it was the fact that there was a sense of relief. We've got it now, and that was really welcome.
Well, two things. First of all, I am pleased that the Conservative MP for Watford is not doing the jabs himself personally. That would if I was going for my jab, I'd be a bit. I'll wait for a nurse. But also, because you've been volunteering since March, then your eyes must have been opened. You must have seen some truly harrowing sights.
Well, I think what I've seen is that the NHS team's working incredibly hard and consistently throughout the whole crisis. And I think, I know I've mentioned about the select committee that I'm on, but also in the chamber, what it's meant is that I've been able to ask questions that I have either heard on the front line, been asked on the front line, or seen myself. And that's been really, really valuable for me because, even down to things like mental health, the anxiety that was that staff had, especially in the early days, I've been able to really lobby on that. So I was pleased that the NHS and the government announced quite a lot of measures around mental health for staff in the NHS, and that was something I really pushed hard on. I was pleased that came through. So I think what it's given me is a different dimension, because I get to see and speak to the decision makers through the select committee. I get to speak to politicians and do that within Parliament and within the community with patients. But at the hospital, I get to see the reality, and that enables me to ask questions that I think are slightly different than perhaps many politicians. But really, it's been an experience where I feel really proud of the work that the teams have done, especially at Watford General Hospital, but I'm sure across the country. And I have to say, on Christmas Day when I was in there, I just felt that the wards were full, people working really hard, but there's just a sense of let's get on with this, let's get through it. And that's why, I think following the simple rules of stay at home, protect the NHS and save lives really ring true for me, because I've seen it firsthand.
Dean, as always, appreciate your time and thank you so much for joining us this morning. That was Dean Russell there, as a Conservative MP for Watford, who's also part of the all-party Parliament group for coronavirus that's looking at the long COVID this week.